to go about 2 minutes, but I'm just going to ask to remind you about how we're going to use Slido. So Slido, go on www.slido.com. What is it? Brilliant, thank you. Slido.com, and then if you type in hashtag inclusion NHS, you can also pose your questions. They'll come up as we're getting ourselves sorted. I've got 5 very interesting people to ask some questions of. I'm quite looking forward to it. This is like when you're, I'm not sure what show it is, but I'm quite enjoying it already, to be honest with you. There's a dysfunctional family up there. Thank you, So I think how I'd love to really up for that is we'll start with a question that's on Slido, but by all means do ask some questions, put your hands up, ask away. It's a real opportunity for us all to learn together, so please take that opportunity together. Right, so, oh, have you got a microphone?
Yes.
There's the man that likes karaoke. Right, shall we just do an introduction of just across you all, who you are, and probably give your reflections as to what you've learnt so far as part of the morning, if that's helpful. So if we start with you, Terry, you've got like 10 minutes, pass on.
So, is it morning? Morning, everyone. I'm Terry Willows, I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs for the 8 CCGs, and I have the sort of legal brief, if you want, for equalities and diversity across the CCGs, and accountable to Adam for delivery of our legal responsibilities. For me, there's so much in the conversations that in the presentations we've had this morning. 2 really big things for me. The thing about, I'm gonna missay it, but the reflexivity, which I think just really hit something really powerful with me about taking time out collectively, individually, to think about and learn together about how we're approaching things. I think that's a really important thing. And then in Yvonne's presentation so much, obviously, I know some of that data, and I know some of our data, but actually the stuff at the start about it's not just data, what we're doing and how we are treating people from a BME background in our organisation is materially impacting on their health, on their life chances. Really powerful stuff.
Thanks, Terry. Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Hill. I'm a GP in Crawley and clinical care chair for Crawley CCG in the North Place of our alliance. I'm also the equalities champion for our North Place, so we have been skimming around the edges and trying to make sense of some of this data for a little while now. So it's been quite a challenge for me to properly hear some of the presentations that we've heard this morning. And you know, probably the most important thing I've heard today was from Jay, just now, when we had our little 5-minute conversation. We were reflecting on experiences and thoughts. Do you mind me saying, Jay? Now, she says the whole room. Sorry. Open racism is easier to deal with because you can challenge it. And I think my learning from today is much of it is hidden. I don't think we do enough to challenge the odd comments that might be voiced. And really take stock of how we're reflecting our populations. Crawley as a town has 27% of its community is from a black or minority ethnic background. And unless we really clearly represent that in the makeup of our board and the way we lead our organisations, we're missing a trick, I think, in really galvanising quality of care and patient safety. So really important messages and a lot of work to do, which is a good thing.
So I'm Jeremy Dawson, you've already heard me speak, so I won't introduce myself there, but I think the thing that I take most from what I heard Yvonne say is, again, listening to her very powerful reflections on her personal experiences at the start. And for me, I mean, for all of us, but particularly for me as a white man, this is not something I experience myself. And I have to keep listening to the experiences of others, so I really try to understand what people are going through, and it constantly reminds me why this is so important.
Thank you. For me, what was particularly, I suppose, heartening was looking out onto a sea of predominantly white faces and people looking up with interest. Because I do this a lot, and people play with their watches, they play with their phones, they look all over the place, they walk out of the room, and you did not. So there was a lot of interest in the room in terms of what I was saying, so I'm really very grateful to you all for that.
For me, I'm a big fan of staff engagement, and when I hear speakers, Professor Dawson and Ron Coggill, CBA, speak about staff engagement and the fantastic impact it can have on patient outcomes, it really makes me feel good, and to be able to hear them share that message so eloquently and clearly, so we can see that it's not a theory. It's proven through hours and years of research and reports that actually if we really engage with our staff and really and truly are interested in them and want our staff to be their best, then what happens is that we actually save lives, we save taxpayers' money, we have a better society. The NHS is part of society, isn't separate too. And so by doing and delivering our services highly, we will actually help improve lives in society.
So let's get cracking then. Well, I'm quite on my other side. Right, so interestingly, okay, so we're going to be compassionate, but we're going to think about ourselves too. So how do we balance compassionate leadership with increasing demand and high numbers of vacancies which are putting pressure on staff at every level? It's got the most likes. If we give the context, that's helpful. We're eight organisations coming together in a way that I think some people do go, well, there's another change again here, but we're up to that again. And also, there's a rumour that we've got to cut how much it costs to run the organisation, so people are a bit worried. So how do you compassionately lead with all that going on? Jeremy, look at your perspective first of all, sort of from an academic perspective, what you've seen, and then maybe Yvonne, then to give your perspective of what you've seen practically, if that's helpful.
So it's a really good question. It's a difficult one to answer, but I think the first thing to say is compassionate leadership is not an optional extra. It's absolutely got to be at the core of this, and it's particularly important in this context. We can't individually, most of us have almost no influence on what's happening across the NHS at a national level in terms of the amount of resource we get. There are some things we can do, but we don't, we can't go back to office and say, okay, actually we're going to hire an extra 10 staff tomorrow, because we don't have that capability. However, what this means is we have to be extra sensitive to it, and compassionate leadership is going to be at the very basis of what we need to do on a day-to-day basis when we are leading our organisations. I work in the university, and it's true for me in that setting as it is for you working in the NHS. But unless the people we are leading feel that they are being understood, they are being listened to, they are being engaged, they are not going to be able to give their best, they are not going to feel that they are doing the work that they set out to do, and they are not going to, many of them will not be well. And actually that just leads to worse problems in the long run. If we've got more staff going off with stress, that's going to increase problems rather than decrease them. Compassionate leadership is only one part of the picture, but it's an absolutely crucial one.
I think our NHS is going through a really, really difficult time. We've got 52,000 nursing vacancies. We have nearly 30,000 doctor vacancies across the whole of our NHS. We are having to save money. The pressure on the services are much, much higher than they ever have been. We're just going into winter now, and it's going to be difficult to make sure that all of our patients get the quality of care and services that they all deserve. And what compassionate leadership does in looking after your staff is it means that staff will give you that extra 10%. I was at an award ceremony earlier in the year, and the nurse that actually won the award last winter, she walked 3 hours in the snow to get to work. She did her shift, and she stayed on and she did another couple of hours, and she walked 3 hours back home. And why did she do that? When I was talking to her, she said, I just love my job. I love the people that I'm working with, and I didn't want to let my manager down. That, in a nutshell, is what it's all about. Because if you haven't got the numbers of staff, and staff are leaking out the door, 98% reduction in the number of people applying, nurses applying to come here from Europe, 98%. And you haven't got the people. You have to look after the people you've got. And one organisation in London, and I'll be talking about this organisation in the workshop, has a waiting list for nurses because of the compassionate leadership. So it's not something that is over there somewhere, and also, well, we can think about that another time. It's really essential that we think about this in terms of the vacancy numbers, because there is pressure at every level. And what we have to do is to have joy in our work. And to have joy in your work means that you need to have senior leaders who understand you, who are compassionate with you, who are going to help you to do your job properly. And I think that's what needs to happen.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Anyone else? I would reflect it's a responsibility of all of us as leaders within our organisation to push from the grassroots up. I observe that we are being kinder to each other in our offices, the ones that I visit, particularly since our staff alliance actually. People feel more open and able to just say, how are you? How are things going? And I think we really need to work on that, because it takes some energy to keep going. As soon as the pressure increases and we're all under fire to deliver or make change, it can be hard to do, but I think we need to care and be kind to each other as a starting point.
For me, and I was just saying this to Sarah, isn't it? We're all incredibly busy, so I look at the audience and see kind of members of my team that I know are working, all hours of the day and night. I know it's the same for all of you. We've all got so much on our plate. But the point I put to Sarah was, are we prioritising the right things? And if we look at the evidence that has been clearly drawn for us today about the link between compassion, between engagement and outcomes, then why wouldn't we want to be perhaps prioritising that over and above some of the other things, which are priorities, of course they are, but they might not be as high on our priority list as we think they should be.
So I think the advice you're giving us, I think, is you have to do it, because it's the right thing to do, first of all, and whatever motivates you, compassion is what we've got to put into our organisation, because what we're going to do is tricky, because we're supposed to be doing tricky stuff because we're leading the local system, so I get that. Really helpful. If there's any questions you want to ask as a follow-up, please raise your hand. Otherwise, there's some juicy ones up there. I'm quite looking forward to the answers now. Right. Neil, do you mind just scrolling? There was there. Okay, right. Interesting. We put the workforce disability information there too. We haven't yet. Okay. So how will? Oh, Tom, you've got the controller. Fine. So how will we address the disparities in our representation in our boards and governing bodies? And probably can we cover that in the res piece, really, if that makes sense, because I think we've got the disability piece later on this afternoon, haven't we, really, but we've heard quite a lot from Ron and Ray. So first of all, by asking the question, we're acknowledging that there's an issue, which is the first part of it, I think, which is good. Okay, so we're acknowledging there's an issue. Okay, what do we do about it? Should we ask maybe Yvonne for her sort of take on Byron, and and then Laura, that if you are chairing a board, and then how we would respond to that. Is that how the way is? Is that all right?
Thank you. It's a tricky one. It's not an easy one, and it's not an easy one because of the pipeline. And you will have seen the fact that we have non-executives and we have executives, and the executive pipeline needs a lot of work. There needs to be some focus and development and training of boards. I'm not going to say of BME people because we're trained to within an inch of our lives. So there needs to be some understanding of the benefits a diverse board can bring. Because people say to me often, you know, well, Yvonne, they have to be able to do the job. So the inference is that you can only do the job if you're from a white middle class background. Well, actually, some of us have got something other, you know, and different to bring. So I think it's really important that we think about that and how we can make sure that the executive pipeline is paid attention to. The non-executive pipeline is another story as well, because I think that in order to get more black and ethnic minority non-executives, work has to be done at making the actual role attractive to bring people in, and it can't be the old boys network, or I know, you know, Major Smith down the road and he's really good at, you know, his time in the army, so let's bring him in to do something on our board, which happens. So what you need to do is to actually go out and make the headhunters do their work for their money. I was with some headhunters yesterday, Odgers actually, and they're very keen to work with organisations around developing ways of getting black and ethnic minority people through the system, because they just aren't there. So we have to work at this.
Sorry, I didn't introduce myself first time out. I'm Byron Curry. I'm the Deputy Director for Inclusion at the CCG Alliance. So how do we address our disparities in our representation regarding where's in our boards and governing bodies? I'm going to focus on staff and data analysis recently on the staff within the CCG Alliance. And so for me, there's a few things the organisation can do. First of all, it can market itself. It can make itself an employer to the local populations. So for example, in places like Crawley and Brighton, where we see a significant increase of BME populations in recent years, we can actually undertake some form of outreach work to enable all communities to understand what we do as an organisation and how their skills might be utilised within it. The traditional way that we recruit is that we put our jobs on NHS Jobs, which is really an industrial website, really, isn't it? It's for the NHS people to apply for jobs within the NHS. We probably don't do sufficient outreach with our communities. That's one thing, and that's about getting numbers in. It's how do we keep them? Well, first of all, we apply compassionate leadership. We ensure that people are appraised. We ensure that people have objectives, that they have career pathways for people within the organisation. We ensure that the culture that we have and the behaviours that we espouse are evidenced, and that if people are rude, abusive, abrupt, inappropriate, then they are supported to challenge in a positive way. And we also develop robust res action plans, so we know what we look like as an organisation. We understand some of what people are saying to us. So when I say that, I'm talking about the staff survey. So we are unable to slice the staff survey data into ethnicity because we have too few BME staff. So we cannot actually specifically understand what BME staff are saying from the staff survey because the numbers are so few. But as a group of CCGs, it's well within our wit to work with the staff equalities networks that we're developing, to have some sessions where leaders can speak to staff to understand their experiences, and then that would help inform and shape strategies on how the organisation runs and operates moving forward to make it a better place and a more sustainable place for employment for BME people.
Thank you. This takes a cultural change, and we need to do this together. So yes, all levels of our organisation must be representative of the communities that we are serving. But I don't think it starts necessarily at the board down. For me, it starts from the bottom up. At the very beginning of our time, Byron, you challenged me, and I heard it about how we recruit, the methods we use to recruit. And we had a similar conversation at the staff conference, didn't we, around that values-based way of interviewing people and positively selecting people for their skills, and some of the ways we can challenge our perceptions of how those, more regular panel type interviews happen. For me, I'm taking away a need to re-hear and re-look at the evidence that we have been looking at together, and to listen. I don't think I've heard enough of the actual experiences of people in our organisation, and to be informed enough to know and to hear from them how we need to change things. I don't think our board, because it's not as representative as I would like it to be, is the right place to be making decisions about how we do that. They need to own and champion and enable, I think, those from within our organisation who've had the experiences to be telling us how we need to change.
So one's gone fast up the list, really. So can we learn any lessons from other organisations, such as the Met, which have similar issues and needs to change org culture?
Can I answer that? Of course you can. I recently was fortunate enough to be invited to the senior leaders of the Metropolitan Police, the chief constables and other superintendents. And I have to tell you, we are doing much better than they are. Across the board, the NHS, because we are doing res, are being consistently asked by other government bodies to tell them, to show them, to enable them in terms of what we're doing. So we are actually way ahead of the curve as far as the police are concerned, and actually a lot of other government organisations as well. So, when Theresa May was doing the race disparity audit, it was my team and my team members that were actually working really hard with them to give them the evidence that they needed, because we have evidence now, 3 years of hard evidence in the NHS, and lots of other organisations haven't even started to go down that road, and the Met Police definitely have not. So I don't know who came up with that question, but we are doing really, really well at looking at what the issues are and coming up with the solutions to find them. So I won't be looking to the Met. I might be looking elsewhere, but not the Met. Anybody else?
That's a no about that. We've got the memo on that one, if that's all right. Next one then. Okay, great, here I go. Do we understand and acknowledge white male privilege well enough to make a positive change about this? And how do we improve the awareness of this in our organisation? So,
Well, I'm not sure about exact. I mean, there are all sorts of ways we can do this. But I just want to go back to something Adam said a couple of questions ago, which is, we acknowledge there's a problem. Well, I'm pleased to see that in this room, people are acknowledging there's a problem. Some of you will have acknowledged that before coming along today. Some of you will have been convinced by some of the evidence that you've seen this morning. But actually, I think that one of the big issues we face is that many people do not acknowledge there's a problem. In the wider NHS, in wider society, there are large numbers of people who don't accept that white male privilege is as big an issue as it is, or indeed an issue at all. If one was talking earlier about BME, people having to work twice as hard to get half as far, I think there's an analogy there as well. It's to get this message across, we have to work twice as hard as we would with other messages, because for whatever reason, there is not a universal acceptance of this, and I think the only way we're going to make significant progress is for that message to be constantly espoused, and it needs to be espoused from everyone. Yvonne says it wonderfully, but it needs to come from white male people like myself as well, so that it reaches as many people as it possibly can.
So I think that's really helpful, because this is part of the conversation today, and the only way we're going to change the culture of our organisations is to begin talking about these things in an open and transparent way. And I think this is really important today as part of kind of kicking off that process. There's lots of stuff going on. We've done some analysis on the gender pay gap, actually. So Geraldine and Glyn have been leading some work on that, and there's some engagement, particularly on gender. And I think we obviously need to think about the same kind of approach and work in relation to our black and minority ethnic representation in the higher elements of our organisation. I just want to say something, just drawing on Jeremy's last point, which is it's really important looking around the room. So I am a white, middle-class, middle-aged, young, middle-aged person. It's really important that I say to you that I recognise that I am privileged to be in this position. And I think all of us, in all our positions, are privileged to be in the position that we are, working for the NHS, striving for a better outcome for our patients. And I think if each of us take anything from today, it's recognising that privilege that we've all got, and being open and transparent about how we're going to do our jobs in the best interests of our patients.
And I think that's really helpful feedback. But I think also helpfully for us is to recognise that I think we've all the privilege that some of us found it a bit easy to get where we got to. Is that fair? I think it's a really interesting question, because privilege is something that people see as being, something extra special that people have. White privilege is about just being white. In a society, in a world that has whiteness as the default for good. So if you are born white, regardless of your class and your background, you are born with a premium. If you're born black and poor, it's much harder for you than being born white and poor, because society is set up for white people, and we haven't got time to talk about this, a thing called a hierarchy of colour in our society, where the lighter and the nearer you are to white, the better and more accepted you are. And actually Jeremy and Michael did a piece of work a while ago called Making the Difference. And in that document, if you care to look at it, you can see there's a hierarchy of colour in our NHS. There's a preference for lighter skinned people, for people that don't look too different with their hijab because of the faith thing that goes on. We in the NHS don't acknowledge that there's privilege, but actually we have preferences for types of people that are more like us. And because white is the default, people are more, they choose to actually identify with people that are lighter skinned than people that are darker skinned. But that's a whole other conversation. But it's just about making sure that people understand that the privilege is about just having white skin in a world that is predominantly, actually predominantly black. More people have melanin in their skin than white people. But people say to me, well, what if I go to Africa, Yvonne? Well, if you go to Africa, you will still be treated better than the black man going to Africa. If you go to China, people won't be taking pictures of you every 5 minutes. As a black person, you go to China, everybody thinks you're a novelty. But if you're a white person, everybody thinks that you're fantastic and wonderful and treats you beautifully. It's a global issue. So owning your white privilege is something that all white men and women should do.